Hey, did you know that over 90% of our viewers watch our videos but haven't subscribed yet? If you enjoy these true trucker horror stories, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It's free and really motivates us to keep the stories rolling. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into today's stories. The night presses close against the open road, carrying a silence that feels almost alive. Welcome to the sleep haunt, where truth lingers in the shadows and fear rides quietly at your side. Tonight, we bring you 6 true most haunting trucker horror stories encounters born from deserted highways, dim rest stops, and long stretches of darkness where something unseen kept pace with the wheels. Before we begin, we've set a goal. Let's reach 100 likes on this video. Tap that like button now and help us keep rolling deeper into the dark. And share your city and the time you're listening in the comments. Let's see who's awake with us on the night road. Now, settle in, breathe slow, and listen. The road remembers everything. Story number 1. It began on a late autumn night, on a road most truckers preferred to avoid. The driver's name was Daniel. He had been hauling freight for over a decade, long enough to know which shortcuts were worth the risk and which ones were nothing but trouble. But that night, a delay at the warehouse had put him hours behind schedule, and a dispatcher's tight voice had nudged him toward a choice he usually refused. Highway 63. On a map, it looked like an easy diagonal slice across the state, shaving off almost an hour from the trip. In practice, drivers said it felt like a road that had been forgotten by the rest of the world. Long, narrow, without many exits, and lined with ditches and empty fields that turned into black pools of nothing after sundown. Daniel told himself it was just another stretch of asphalt. And for the first 2 hours, that seemed true. His truck rolled smoothly along the faded lane markings. His headlights pushed a calm, steady beam into the night. The radio played quietly, some classic rock station losing its signal a little more with every mile. By 10 o'clock, he'd left the last decent town behind. The road narrowed. The reflectors along the shoulder thinned out, then disappeared. The yellow lines down the middle were so worn they were barely visible. That was when the CB crackled. Daniel's hand moved automatically to lower the volume. At that hour, the channels were usually either quiet or filled with static, and he wasn't in the mood for chatter. Before he could turn it down, a voice came through. Clear, calm, close. Daniel, you're still on 63. He froze. The voice wasn't loud, but it cut straight through the static, as if it had been waiting for the exact moment he reached for the dial. It sounded like a man, maybe in his 40s, with a low, even tone. No accent he could place, no familiar edge. Daniel glanced at the radio, then at the empty road ahead. The CB was set to a channel he rarely used, one he'd flipped to earlier when a weather alert had come through. There were no truck headlights in either mirror, no sign of anyone nearby who could see his rig and recognize it. He cleared his throat, though no one could see that. Someone was probably just playing around, he decided. Maybe a driver who'd noticed his company logo at a rest stop earlier and decided to spook him a little. The radio hissed softly, then that same voice returned, almost thoughtful. About 3 miles ahead, there's going to be a car in the ditch. No lights. Left side. Don't drift. Daniel's foot eased off the accelerator. He stared through the windshield, into the narrow tunnel of his headlights. The road looked empty. The ditches on either side were bottomless black. He flipped the CB off. Enough of that, he thought. He'd been awake too long. A mind could play tricks in the dark. He let the truck roll, eyes fixed, hands steady on the wheel. Minutes passed. The music station gave up entirely, dissolving into full static. He turned it off as well, leaving only the engine's muted growl and the gentle thrum of tires over worn pavement. Then his headlights washed over something pale at the far edge of their reach. Daniel's breath caught. A small car lay nose down in the left side ditch, its tail pointed toward the road at an awkward angle. No emergency flashers, no headlights, no movement inside. Just a silent shape half swallowed by the tall grass. He checked the mirrors and eased into the opposite lane, giving it as wide a berth as he safely could. The truck rumbled past. For a few seconds, he could see the car clearly. The windows were dark. The windshield looked intact. A fine mist of breath fogged his own glass as he exhaled, tension leaving his shoulders only when the wreck slid out of sight. He kept going. There was nowhere safe to stop. and calling it in would have to wait until there was a signal again. By the time he'd talked himself into believing it was coincidence, the CB turned itself back on. Or that was how it felt. The speaker popped softly, and the green display, which he was certain he had switched off, glowed again. "You did good," the voice said. "Some drivers drift. Hard habit to break when you're tired." Daniel did not touch the microphone. He didn't answer. He just stared at the road and tried to slow his breathing. Static rose, then faded, like a sigh. "You don't have to talk," the voice went on. "But keep listening. It's better if you know what's coming." There was something oddly gentle in the way the man spoke, the way he didn't rush, didn't laugh. That scared Daniel more than if it had been a prankster cackling on the other end. Curiosity chipped away at his silence. "How do you know my name?" he asked finally. He regretted breaking the quiet the moment the words left his mouth. His own voice sounded too small in the cab. Too real. He tightened his grip on the wheel, half expecting no answer at all, half expecting something that would make him want to turn his truck around and never look back. "I've heard you on here before," the man replied calmly. "Your handle's just your first name." Not hard to put together. A reasonable answer. Almost disappointingly ordinary. Daniel exhaled, the tightness in his chest easing a bit. He'd forgotten how many lonely nights he'd passed on the road, making quick chatter with strangers over the CB, just to stay awake. "All right," Daniel said. "Where are you then?" "Not far," the voice said. "And a long way away. Both at once. Doesn't really matter. What matters is the mile marker you just passed." Daniel glanced out to the right. The deer-scarred sign at the shoulder read 219. "Some stretches of road," the voice continued, "don't like to be empty. They start folding in on themselves when there's not much traffic. Most drivers keep their distance from this one after dark. Dispatchers pretend not to know why." The words should have sounded ridiculous. They didn't. Something in the quiet confidence behind them made Daniel swallow hard. He tried to laugh it off. "You're saying the highway is... what, haunted?" "That's one way to put it," the man said. "Another is, it forgets where it's supposed to go. And sometimes, a truck forgets with it." Out of habit, Daniel checked the clock on the dash. The time blinked back at him, unchanged for a second too long before rolling over to the next minute. His eyes went back to the road. "What do you want?" he asked. "To make sure you get off this road tonight," the voice answered. "In one piece, with your truck, and with less extra company than some get." A low breeze brushed across the side of the cab, nudging the trailer slightly. Daniel adjusted for it. Out beyond the reach of his headlights, the fields were just a depthless sea of black. The miles crawled by. Each time he passed a marker, he looked, telling himself he wouldn't. 220. 221. 222. Next services, 27 miles. Read a standing sign ahead, bleached by years of Sunday. The fuel gauge was dipping lower than he liked. Not dangerously low, but enough to make the idea of that upcoming station feel like a small comfort waiting in the dark. The CB hissed again. "Don't stop there," the voice said. "Not on this run." Daniel frowned. "I'm going to need fuel." "You'll make it to the junction," the man replied. "Just stay in your lane. Don't pull over. Don't leave the road unless you see more than 3 sets of headlights at once." "Why 3?" Daniel asked. "2 can be a reflection," the voice said, "or something that wants you to think it's a reflection." A soft tapping noise came from somewhere behind Daniel's seat, like fingernails against plastic. He twisted slightly to look, but saw only the dim interior of the sleeper berth, the edges blurred by darkness. The tapping stopped as soon as he turned. "Fatigue," he told himself. Just the truck shifting over a rough patch of pavement. Ahead, the faint glow of sodium lights rose like a mirage. The gas station. As he drew closer, details emerged. A wide parking lot with only one car in it, a dusty sedan parked by the side of the building. The station lights hummed, casting a yellowish halo over the pumps. The windows of the attached convenience store were lit but seemed strangely empty, like a stage set without actors. Daniel's hands tightened on the wheel. His fuel gauge sat lower than he liked now. If anything went wrong farther down the road, he'd have no margin. The CB speaker was quiet for a long moment, as if the voice were waiting to see what he would do. "Daniel," it said at last, more urgent than before. "Keep driving." He slowed. The truck's engine growled in protest as he eased it toward the exit lane. Gravel crunched under the tires as they left the main asphalt. The steering felt heavier, as if the rig wanted to stay on the highway. "You're making it worse," the man's voice hissed, the first hint of real frustration breaking through. Daniel's jaw set. "I'm not running out of fuel in the middle of nowhere because some stranger on a radio doesn't like this station." He turned into the lot. The station looked ordinary, he reminded himself firmly. Just old. Not dangerous, not cursed, just neglected. A strip of moth-eaten light flickered over pump number 4. The digital price sign in front clicked, digits stuck halfway between numbers. He parked beside a pump and shut off the engine. The sudden quiet felt heavy. The tapping behind his seat began again, slow, measured. He told himself it was just the truck cooling, metal relaxing after the strain of the road. He opened the door and climbed down. Outside, the air was cooler than he expected. It smelled faintly of dust and fuel, and something else he couldn't name. A soundless kind of emptiness lay over the place. No insects buzzed around the lights. No hum of distant highway noise. Just his own footsteps. He waited for the creak of the door from the convenience store, the shuffle of a night clerk coming out to check on the stranger at the pumps. Nothing happened. Daniel swiped his card. The screen on the pump blinked, then slowly, reluctantly, came to life. As he filled the tank, he looked toward the store. Through the huge front windows, rows of shelves were visible. Snacks, drinks, a magazine rack. Behind the counter, a small television flickered silently, showing a weather radar that didn't seem to move. There should have been someone behind that counter. A clerk, a janitor, anyone. But there was no one. The hairs at the back of his neck rose. A figure moved at the far corner of his vision, near the edge of the lot. He turned quickly. The darkness beyond the ring of light was empty. He finished fueling faster than usual, tempted to leave without even grabbing a coffee. As he capped the tank and climbed back into the cab, he forced himself not to look at the store windows again. The moment the door shut, the CB crackled with static, loud enough to make him flinch. "You shouldn't have done that," the voice said quietly. "Now they know your truck." Daniel started the engine. The dashboard came alive. For a second, every gauge flickered, as if they were all dropping to zero, then recovered. "Who?" he asked, throat dry. "Who knows my truck?" Silence. He pulled out of the lot and back onto Highway 63. The moment his tires hit the main road, a light shudder ran through the cab, as if the truck itself sighed in relief. The mile markers began to pass again. 222, 223, 224. After a while, he realized something was wrong. The next marker was 222 again. He blinked. Maybe he'd misread the last one. The numbers were worn after all. Then 223. Then 224. Then, once more, 222. The same bent reflector by the shoulder. The same small patch of scrubby bushes on the right. The same faded billboard in the distance, advertising a motel that, according to the sign, was just 18 miles ahead, a promise that never seemed to draw closer. He checked the clock. Only a minute had passed since he'd last looked. The road was looping. The CB came alive again, the voice now sounding strained, farther away, like it was fighting through deeper static. "This is what happens," the man said. "When you stop where you shouldn't, the road folds. It keeps you. Over and over. The same few miles. Most drivers don't notice until it's too late." Daniel's pulse pounded. "How do I get out of it?" There was a pause. "You listen," the man said. "And you don't trust anything you hear that isn't coming from this speaker. No matter how much it sounds like someone you know. No matter how much it sounds like yourself." As if on cue, another sound joined the mix. A soft knocking on the passenger side door. 3 gentle taps, exactly spaced. Then 3 more. Daniel did not look. "There's nothing there," the voice on the CB said. "Keep your eyes on the road. Hands at 10 and 2. Maintain 53 miles an hour. Not 52, not 54, 53. Daniel's foot settled, as carefully as if he were stepping onto thin ice. The speedometer's needle hovered at 53. The knocking persisted for a while, then stopped. Something brushed along the trailer, a faint dragging sound that slowly moved toward the rear. In the mirrors, there was nothing but his own trailer lights and the unbroken dark. "Who are you?" Daniel asked, keeping his gaze straight ahead. "Really, someone who didn't listen soon enough," the man said. "Someone who thought the first loop was just a long stretch. By the time the gas ran out, it was already done." Another billboard slid past, the same motel, the same, just 18 miles ahead, the same missing corner in the sign, broken years ago by some windstorm. "How many times have you seen it?" Daniel asked. "More than you want to know," the man replied softly. The loop continued. Marker 222. Lambay Arshasan. Lambay Arshasi. The motel billboard. The knocking returned, this time from the driver's side door. A muffled voice called out, so faint it was almost covered by the hum of the engine. It sounded like his own. Distorted. "Daniel, you missed the exit. You need to turn around. You need to stop." His hands tightened on the wheel until his knuckles ached. "Don't answer," the CB voice warned. "Don't even think to answer. That thing outside the cab isn't you." The loops went on. With each pass, the darkness outside the reach of his headlights seemed to thicken, pressing closer. The empty fields felt less like open land and more like a vast, low ceiling getting lower. Daniel's eyelids grew heavy, not with natural sleepiness, but with a weight that seemed to seep out of the road itself. "Stay with me," the man on the radio said. "One more loop, then another. Eventually the road will remember where it's supposed to go. It always does. If someone is helping from the inside." "How do you know?" Daniel managed. "Because sometimes," the man said, "it lets one truck go, when it takes another." The words settled over the cab like a thin layer of frost. The next mile marker came into view. Lambay Arshawu. Daniel blinked, making sure he'd seen it right. Then the next. 226. The motel billboard this time was different, a new advertisement, for a different chain, with a different distance printed at the bottom. The road was changing back. The pressing darkness eased, just a fraction. The air in the cab felt less thick. On the CB, the static rose sharply. The man's voice pushed through it, now sounding distant, like someone shouting from the other side of a long tunnel. "Don't stop," he said. "Not until you see the lights of the junction. Stay in your lane. Don't look at the shoulders. Don't look in the mirrors." Daniel obeyed. For 10 long minutes, he drove without glancing at the mirrors once. Shapes moved in the corners of his eyes, as if the fields on either side of the truck were no longer empty. But he refused to acknowledge them. Something scraped lightly along the side of the trailer, keeping pace, then fell away when a distant orange glow appeared on the horizon, the lights of the interstate junction. The CB crackled violently. Static flooded the cab, then thinned just enough for the man's voice to come through one last time. "Exit is coming up on your right," he said. "You'll see other trucks. Once you're on that ramp, you're off its map. After that, try not to think about this place again." "Wait," Daniel said. "What about you?" But the speaker had already gone silent. He merged onto the ramp as soon as it appeared, his hands shaking. The moment his wheels hit the new pavement of the larger highway, the world around him snapped back into something that felt normal. There were other headlights now, real ones, moving in a predictable flow. The sky was lighter, tinted faintly by the glow of distant towns. His clock suddenly skipped forward by almost an hour. The CB remained quiet. At the next large truck stop, Daniel pulled in and parked. The lot was bright, busy, and loud in a comforting way. Diesel engines idled. People laughed near the entrance. The smell of coffee and frying food drifted through the air. Later that night, sitting with a paper cup in his hands, he overheard 2 older drivers talking at a nearby table. They spoke about Highway 63, about how dispatchers still sometimes routed rookies along it to save a few miles, and how some trucks never quite made it through in one clean stretch. One of them mentioned the radio. "Every once in a while," the man said, "someone hears a voice on the CB around mile marker 219. Calm fella. Knows your name. Keeps you out of the ditch. No one knows who he is. Last we heard, he was a driver who vanished out there years ago." Static picked up his last words and never let them go. Daniel stared into his coffee. He never drove Highway 63 again after dark. When dispatch suggested it, he found another route, even if it meant being late. Still, on certain nights, When the road was empty and the hours stretched longer than they should, his CB would give a small, soft pop. The display would flicker on just for a moment, to a channel he hadn't chosen. And somewhere, buried in the static, a calm, patient voice would whisper a route number or a gentle warning, guiding a stranger through a stretch of road that did not like to be alone. Story number 2. Lena had been driving long haul for 12 years before she took the job that everyone else on the yard kept politely turning down. It came in on a cold, windless afternoon, quietly posted on the dispatch screen. Single pickup, single drop, overnight run. The route itself looked simple enough. An 8-hour shot across the state, a straight line between 2 small towns she'd never heard of. The pay, however, was strange. It was triple the usual rate. Drivers stood around the break room coffee pot that day, glancing at the job listing and then looking away, as if pretending it wasn't there. Nobody outright said why they wouldn't take it. They just gave odd, vague answers. Tight schedule, one guy muttered. Roads out that way get weird, another added, then changed the subject when she asked what he meant. Lena didn't believe in strange roads or haunted anything. She believed in maintenance schedules, logbooks, and the comfort of a dashboard lit up exactly the way it should be. She believed in paying off the last of her debts and finally getting ahead. So she claimed the load. The instructions came through in a separate email from dispatch, written in a stiff, almost legal voice. Pickup, cold storage facility #47, Dock 3. Cargo, temperature, sensitive, sealed. Requirements: maintain trailer temperature at exactly 34 degrees Fahrenheit for duration. Do not open the trailer doors under any circumstances. Do not break or tamper with the lock provided. Avoid extended stops. No more than 20 minutes at any one location. If approached about contents, refer all questions to corporate. No team drivers. Single operator only. The last line made her pause. Most delicate loads wanted 2 drivers, not 1. But the system had already assigned it to her. The pay was right there in bold numbers. She told herself the rest was just corporate paranoia. That evening, she hooked to the assigned refrigerated trailer. It was older than she liked, off-white sides with faint ghost outlines where an old company logo had been peeled away. The metal held a dull sheen in the yard lights. The refrigeration unit hummed, steady and cold, a faint layer of frost clinging to the edges of the vents. On the back doors hung a heavy black lock, newer than the trailer itself. It wasn't a padlock, exactly more like a small metal box with a keypad and a single green light glowing at the corner. A printed tag was zip-tied through its handle. Locked by sender. Do not remove. Do not power off reefer. She checked the unit's digital readout. 34 degrees Fahrenheit. Exactly. By the time she rolled out toward the pickup location, darkness was thick over the highway, swallowing up everything beyond her headlights. The GPS guided her off the main interstate onto older, 2-lane roads that wound through quiet fields and sparse woods. Outside towns, the world felt empty. Houses scattered like distant islands of light. Cold storage facility #47 wasn't on any map she had. It only existed as a set of coordinates on her screen. When she reached them, the place appeared out of the dark as if it had been waiting with its lights off. A tall chain-link fence ran along the roadside. Beyond it, a low, windowless building squatted in a patch of gravel and cracked asphalt. A single sodium lamp buzzed over a sign that simply read, Cold Storage. No company name. No logo. The gate swung open at her approach without anyone stepping out to check credentials. A small security booth stood inside, lights on, but empty. The computer on the desk was on, its screen showing some kind of login screen. The coffee cup beside it had a thin skin on top, as if it had cooled hours ago. Lena's truck rolled to a stop by Dock 3, where a lone figure waited. A man in a heavy jacket, hood up, clipboard in hand. He didn't come close to her door. Just stood in the rectangular light spilling from the open dock door. "You're Lena?" he called up. "Yeah," she answered through the half-open window. "You know the conditions?" he asked. "No door opens, no stops longer than 20 minutes. Temp at 34 the whole way." "I've got it," she said. "What exactly am I hauling?" He hesitated, just a fraction of a second. "It's listed on your manifest," he said finally. "Perishables. Just keep it cold." Perishables. That could mean anything from produce to vaccines. She'd hauled both, but she'd never picked up from a facility that seemed half abandoned and half running on autopilot. He checked her trailer ID, then waved her back into place. The bump against the dock was soft, practiced. She set the brakes and felt the faint shudder as the trailer met the rubber seal. Inside, forklifts whined and beeped for several minutes as they loaded the cargo. She watched the trailer weight creep up on her dashboard gauge, smooth and steady. Nothing about the load's distribution seemed off. No erratic shifts. No sudden jumps. When the man signaled her to pull forward, the doors were already shut, the lock already in place. He didn't offer her paperwork through the window. Instead, her tablet chimed with an incoming document. "You're all set," he said. "Drive safe, driver." "Am I meeting anyone at the drop?" she asked. "They'll be ready," he said. Then in a lower voice, almost an afterthought, "Don't let the temp drift, all right? It doesn't like to warm up." The phrasing snagged in her mind as she pulled out. "It doesn't like to warm up." The reefer's hum deepened as the trailer settled into the night air. Her interior was warm, heater humming softly. Behind her, a sealed rectangle of carefully controlled cold cut through the dark. For the first hour, everything was routine. The road stretched ahead, the yellow lines blinking under her headlights in a steady rhythm. The radio murmured low news and weather. The temperature gauge for the trailer remained perfectly fixed, 34 degrees Fahrenheit, unwavering. Then, around the third hour, near a stretch of road where the cell phone signal thinned out, she heard something. A soft, dull thump from the back of the trailer. It was faint, barely more than a vibration through the frame, as if a small box had shifted. Trailers did that all the time, especially on older roads. She checked her mirrors anyway. The white side of the trailer glowed in her headlights, the metal reflecting a gentle sheen. Nothing looked wrong. Tires all seemed fine. Doors closed. Lock lights still a steady green. The temperature gauge blinked once. 33度. Then back to 34 degrees Fahrenheit. Lena frowned. Reefers fluctuated, of course, kicking on and off to hold a set temperature. But the number in the display usually didn't bother to show every minor step. It held steady unless something significant changed. She watched it for a full minute, distracted enough that she almost missed the quiet. The radio had gone strangely still. No static, no distant stations bleeding over one another. Just a thin, constant hiss, like someone breathing through a wall. She changed frequencies. The sound stayed the same. Outside, the landscape grew emptier. The last small town had fallen away miles ago, leaving only fields and occasional clusters of trees standing dark against the sky. No other headlights appeared ahead. No taillights faded behind. Lena drove on. Another thump sounded from the trailer. This one was sharper, followed by a muffled scrape, like something sliding a few inches and stopping. She glanced at the trailer temp again. 35度. A moment later, the reefer unit on the front of the trailer growled louder, kicking into a higher mode. Cold air pumped, fighting whatever warmth had crept in. Slowly, the display shifted down. 34度. Then, inexplicably, 33 degrees Fahrenheit. The unit softened its hum slightly, as if content. The numbers stayed at 33 degrees Fahrenheit for several minutes. Lena adjusted the dial back up a notch. The display blinked, thought about it, and then settled back to 34 degrees Fahrenheit. "I don't have time for a malfunction tonight," she muttered. She pulled into a well-lit rest area 15 minutes later, intending to do a quick walk-around, check the unit and the tires. The instructions allowed stops, just not long ones. The rest area was almost completely empty. A single car sat near the far end, half covered in road dust, its windows fogged from the cold outside and the warmth inside. No one moved around it. She set her brakes. The quiet descended quickly. Outside, the air bit at her face and hands. Her breath streamed white in the glow of the truck's running lights. Gravel crunched under her boots as she walked back along the side of the trailer, checking each tire, each connection. The reefer unit hummed steadily at the front, its small display reading 34 degrees Fahrenheit in pale, unwavering digits. When she reached the back, she stopped. The lock's green light was gone. In its place, a soft amber glow pulsed slowly, like the light on a sleeping computer. The keypad's surface seemed different too. Where before it had been dry and matte, now a faint sheen of moisture clung to it, like condensation on glass. She peered closer. Her reflection looked strange in the small glossy squares, stretched and distorted. Behind the doors, she heard it again. the dull, quiet thud of something that shouldn't have been able to move. The rest area was silent, too silent. No distant truck noise on the highway, no hum from nearby vending machines. Even the air felt held, waiting. Thoughts flickered through her mind, quick and unhelpful. Maybe it was just badly stacked pallets, shifting. Maybe the warehouse had packed it rush, and something had tipped. Maybe she should open the door and repack it, before something inside damaged itself and those perishables cost her company a fortune. Her hand moved toward the lock. The amber light brightened under her fingers, then dropped to a dim, almost warning glow. The keypad gave a soft, electronic click, as if something inside had shifted position. The instructions came back to her in a rush. Do not open the trailer doors under any circumstances. She let her hand fall. The temperature gauge on the side of the unit, the one she could see from here, flickered. 34 degrees Fahrenheit slid to 39 degrees Fahrenheit in the span of a heartbeat. Then quickly, too quickly, back down to 34 degrees Fahrenheit. It was as if the air inside had warmed dramatically for a second and then been slammed back into place. She knew enough about refrigeration systems to know that wasn't how it worked. Lena circled the trailer once more, deliberately not listening for noises. She climbed back into the cab, shut the door, and let the familiar smell of her own truck calm her. As she pulled out of the rest area, she glanced once in the side mirror. In the diffused reflection of the trailer's back doors, she thought she saw shapes shift and fade, like shadows rearranging themselves in slow motion behind frosted glass. The rest of the drive turned stranger in a way she couldn't easily describe. Time slid. Her dash clock showed the minutes ticking by normally, but the landmarks she expected seemed to come too quickly, then too slowly. One long, empty stretch of road felt like it took 20 minutes to cross. But when she checked the clock again, only 3 minutes had passed. Then a cluster of turns and small bridges she barely remembered navigating somehow ate up nearly an hour. The radio, whatever station she tried, carried a faint sound behind the music, like distant voices overlapping. Not words she could make out, just the cadence of conversation, hundreds of them layered and muted. Every so often, from the back, she heard that quiet thud. Never loud, never frantic. Just a steady, occasional reminder that something, somewhere in the cold behind her, shifted its weight. The drop-off site lay at the far end of a narrow county road, marked only by another small line of text on her GPS. The route took her past old farmhouses and wide fields, their fences leaning and broken in places. A pale fog began to rise from the low ground, hugging the edges of the road. The destination appeared as a cluster of low, black-painted warehouses set far back from the main road. A tall row of trees screened them from view until she was almost on top of the driveway. Unlike the pickup location, this place showed no lights at its front. Only a single red lamp glowed above one of the docks, like an eye half open in the dark. Her GPS pinged. Arrived. Lena hesitated for the first time. She could have turned around. The road behind her was clear. The fog was lifting. She could call dispatch, claim something had gone wrong with directions. Come back in daylight. The reefer behind her gave a soft, final-sounding hum, as if completing a cycle. The temperature display read 34 degrees Fahrenheit. She pulled into the drive. As her truck rolled closer, lights snapped on in sequence along the building's side. Not motion-activated floodlights, but rows of dim, fixed bulbs that glowed a soft yellow, illuminating Dock 5, with just enough brightness to see the painted number. She backed in by habit, lining up with the worn stripes. When the trailer bumped the dock, the red light above it shifted to green. No one came out to greet her. Her tablet chimed. Delivery confirmed. Please remain in vehicle. She set her brakes and waited. The gentle shudder of movement transferred through the frame as someone or something opened the trailer from the inside. The sensor knew the lock's code then. That lock she'd been ordered not to touch yielded without a sound she could hear. The reefer unit's hum changed tone, lowering as the temperature equalized with whatever lay beyond the dock doors. For a moment, she felt an odd sensation in her chest, like stepping from a warm room into a freezer too quickly. Her breath caught, though the air in her cab hadn't changed. She told herself she would not look in the mirrors. Whatever they were doing, whoever they were, could work unseen. But curiosity had teeth. Her eyes flicked to the right-hand mirror just once. In the narrow sliver of reflected view where the inside of her trailer should have been visible with the doors open, there was nothing. No pallets. No boxes. No workers. Just a pale, diffused emptiness, like a room full of very thick fog. Within that fog, the faintest suggestion of movement stirred a shape. Then many, like people walking through a crowd at a distance, except there were no edges to them, no defined arms or faces, just impressions. Her breath slowed without her meaning to change it. Sound in the cab dulled. Something turned, within that blur, as if noticing the angle of the mirror, the line of sight that connected it to her. Lena looked away so fast her neck twinged. Her heart pounded. Sweat chilled on the back of her neck despite the heater's steady warmth. Several minutes later, the movement at the dock shuddered again, in reverse now, like people stepping away from a closing door. The reefer unit's hum shifted back to its normal pitch. Her trailer settled slightly as weight left it. Her tablet chimed again. Delivery complete. Thank you. She waited another full minute before she dared put the truck in gear. As she pulled forward, she saw the trailer doors in the mirror. They were already shut, the black keypad locked back in place, its small green light lit once more. She hadn't seen anyone close them. She drove straight to the main highway and didn't stop until she reached a busy, brightly lit truck stop filled with noise and normal life. When she climbed down, her legs felt unsteady, like she'd been holding her breath for hours. Inside, a couple of other drivers sat at a table trading stories while they picked at late-night meals. As Lena poured herself coffee, she caught a fragment of their conversation. Got offered that cold run again, one of them was saying. Out to the old warehouses past Marlin Creek. Turned it down. Not worth it. What's so bad about it? The other asked. The older driver shrugged. Nobody knows what's in those trailers. Company says it's perishables. Pays high, but they always want a solo driver, and they always want it overnight. Buddy of mine did it once. Said, it felt like he wasn't just hauling freight. Like, he was the one being carried. If that makes sense. The younger man laughed. Carried where? The older driver didn't answer for a moment. His eyes were on nothing in particular, some middle distance beyond the walls. From one side of something to the other, he said finally. Never did it again, said the cold stuck with him. Said sometimes even in July, when he's parked with the engine off, he can hear his reefer humming behind him when it isn't even running. Lena sipped her coffee. Weeks later, when the run posted again, she ignored it. The pay showed in her account, clean and clear, but she sent a quiet note to dispatch. No more cold storage #47 assignments. She never explained why. On certain nights, though, especially on long, empty stretches of highway when the world outside shrank to just her headlights and the muted rumble of the tires, her trailer temperature gauge would flicker. For a second, it would drop to 34 degrees Fahrenheit, no matter what it had been set at. And from somewhere behind her, soft and distant, came the faint, unmistakable sound of something moving in the cold. Story number 3. Miguel had been driving the same east-west route for so many years that certain exits felt almost like mile markers in his own life. There was the rest area where he'd taken a phone call that changed everything. The truck stop where he'd watched an entire thunderstorm roll over the plains like a moving mountain. And there was exit 247, where, once upon a time, there had been a little place called the Horizon Pit Stop. The Horizon hadn't been much, by most people's standards. Just a modest fuel island, a narrow strip of parking, and a low building with a worn blue sign, and a short-order diner that always smelled faintly of coffee and pancake syrup. The owners, a couple named Sam and Eileen, treated every driver as if they'd known them for years. The coffee was strong, the food was cheap, and the kind of quiet you found there at 3 in the morning was the safe kind. That was before the accident. Nobody talked about it in detail. Miguel only knew what the other drivers had passed along later: a tanker on the nearby highway, a bad turn in the rain, a chemical spill that left the air sharp and the soil dangerous. The Horizon had stood right in the zone authorities decided was no longer safe. They closed the exit, shut down the gas pumps, and fenced the whole place off. The next few times Miguel rolled past, the once bright sign had been dark. Then, after a while, the building itself disappeared behind a screen of temporary walls and warning tape. Eventually, he stopped looking for it. The road gave, and it took. That was how it worked. Years later, on a late autumn night, Miguel found himself behind schedule. a heavy load humming behind him, and a tight deadline waiting at dawn. The weather was clear, but the air felt oddly heavy. The sky was a pure, unbroken black, without even the haze of distant towns. His radio drifted between stations, picking up only static and songs he didn't recognize. The glow of his dashboard felt like the only solid thing in a world of darkness. By the time he saw the sign for exit 247, fatigue had settled behind his eyes like a slow, patient weight. He almost didn't look up. When he did, his hands tightened on the wheel. The horizon sign was lit. It burned in the night with the same soft blue it had always had, the same cursive letters. Horizon pit stop, food, fuel rooms. Below it, a smaller illuminated board listed fuel prices that hadn't been seen in years, numbers too low to belong to the present. Miguel blinked hot. For a second, he thought he'd misread the exit number. Maybe another truck stop a few miles down had a similar name. But the next green sign confirmed it. Exit 247. Service area. The arrow pointed straight at memory. He could have passed it. Every instinct, shaped by a decade of clean logbooks and careful choices, told him that detours were for days when you weren't already cutting it close. Yet there was something about that blue glow in the dark, the familiar curve of that old sign that pulled at him. Maybe they'd rebuilt, he told himself. Maybe someone had bought the land, cleared the contamination, and started over. Stranger things had happened. His fuel gauge hovered lower than he liked. His eyes burned from the long, unbroken stretch of blacktop. The thought of hot coffee, and a place he used to know, bottomed its hooks into him. Miguel flicked on his turn signal and took the exit. The ramp curved gently down, the road narrowing, the shoulder markers growing thinner. As his truck descended, the world fell briefly away. The main highway vanished behind him in a wall of trees and rock. It felt, for a moment, like falling off the map. Then the horizon appeared. It was exactly as he remembered it. The pumps stood in a tidy row, their casings shiny but old-fashioned. The main building glowed with warm yellow light. The blue sign hummed softly overhead. A few rigs were already parked along the back edge of the lot, their silhouettes familiar in that universal way all trucks were, yet somehow older. Miguel recognized a long-hooded model he hadn't seen in working order in years, painted in the faded colors of a company that had gone out of business before his second year on the road. The pavement under his tires felt smooth. No cracks, no weeds pushing through, no sign of the fencing and hazard tape he'd glimpsed the last time he'd looked this way. He slowed, easing past the pumps, half expecting to see warning signs or locked doors. Instead, he saw clean glass, a glowing open sign, and through the front windows, a flash of familiar checkered flooring. His phone buzzed softly in its mount just once, then stopped. The screen froze on his navigation app. The tiny arrow of his truck stalled at the edge of the highway, as if he'd never left the main road. Miguel parked in a spot he'd used 100 times before, near the dim patch of grass at the lot's edge. He set the brakes, listening for anything out of place. The engine ticked as it cooled. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked once and then went silent. He climbed down, his boots hitting the pavement with a sound that seemed just a little too loud in the still air. The night smelled faintly of diesel and cold frying oil. A gust of wind moved across the lot, carrying with it something else, a scent that reminded him of rain on hot asphalt, and something metallic underneath. Inside, the diner looked like it had been waiting, exactly as it had. Blue vinyl booths lined the walls, their seats uncracked and shining. A long counter ran the length of the room, topped with smooth, worn laminate. Chrome stools with round seats stood in a perfect row. At the far end, a small TV perched on a shelf played a local news broadcast with the sound turned down low. Eileen stood behind the counter, coffee pot in hand. She looked up as he walked in, and her face broke into the same quick smile he remembered from years ago. Her hair was the same dark shade, pulled back the same way, no gray at her temples. Her apron was bright white, not the older, slightly worn one he'd seen near the end. "Well, there you are," she said, as if he'd only been gone a week. "Long time on the road tonight?" Miguel hesitated. "Yeah," he said slowly. "You could say that. Sit yourself down," she said, gesturing toward an empty stool. "Coffee's fresh. Storm's supposed to be rolling in later. Best to get warmed up before it hits." Storm. He glanced at the front windows. The sky outside was as clear as polished glass. No clouds. No lightning. No hint of anything out of the ordinary. Thought they closed this place down, he said carefully, sliding onto the stool. Eileen snorted softly. Well, if they did, nobody told me, she said. Here you go, sugar. She poured coffee into a thick ceramic mug and set it in front of him. The steam rose in a thin, pale line, like breath on a cold morning. The smell was exactly right, strong, comforting. Miguel wrapped his hands around the cup. The ceramic felt warm, steady. Behind him, one of the truckers in a booth laughed at something his companion said. The sound was familiar, in the way any well-worn joke was. A faint sense of déjà vu tugged at him. His eyes drifted over the room. There, on the wall by the door, hung the same photo collage Sam had put up for Our Regular Road Warriors. Miguel saw faces he recognized from years ago, some streaked by the flash, some with names scrawled under them. People who'd changed companies, changed routes, retired. One who, he knew, had passed away the previous winter. The calendar above the cash register read October. The year printed along the bottom made his throat go dry. 10 years earlier. The exact month of the accident. He checked the clock above the kitchen pass-through. The hands pointed to 2:17. The thin red second hand ticked in place. It did not move. Miguel's gaze dropped to his phone. The screen had gone black. When he tapped it, nothing happened. The battery had been at 60% an hour ago. Phone trouble? Eileen asked lightly. Reception's always been bad out here when the weather starts stirring up. You want to use the landline, you just say so. Miguel lifted the cup and took a sip. The coffee was hot. It tasted like coffee. But there was a faint flatness to it, like it had been brewed from a memory of beans instead of the real thing. A man slid onto the stool 2 seats down, nodding once. Miguel recognized the faded logo on his jacket. A fuel company that had shut its doors 9 years back after being bought out. Road's quiet tonight, the man said. Too quiet. That's when the bad luck likes to hit. You running east or west? East, Miguel replied. The man grunted. Watch mile 252, he said. Tanker went over there a few hours back last time it stormed like this. Whole thing lit up the sky. They say they're going to fix that curve. Never do. He shook his head. Nobody listens till it's too late. Miguel's chest tightened. Mile 252. A tanker. A curve that should have been fixed. He'd heard those details before, in hushed voices at other truck stops, in news clips he'd half-watched years ago. It was the accident that had closed the horizon. The accident that was, in his memory, 10 years gone. Do you remember when that happened? Miguel asked, his voice carefully neutral. The man frowned. Happened? He echoed. It's supposed to hit later tonight, if this storm's anything like they say. You ask me, they ought to shut the whole stretch down ahead of time. But you know how dispatch is. A cold, thin thread worked its way down Miguel's spine. At the other end of the counter, a small radio perched near the coffee machine crackled softly. A local station announcer's voice flowed out, calm and upbeat. And for those of you on the roads tonight, keep an ear on those forecasts, the voice said. They're calling for a line of severe storms rolling across county lines starting just after 2 a.m. Visibility may drop to near zero in some spots. If you don't have to be out there, maybe spend an extra hour at your favorite stop. We'll keep the coffee coming. Miguel checked the TV. The news anchor smiled carefully, gesturing at a weather map behind him. A bright band of red and orange crawled across the screen. By 2:15, we're looking at heavy rain, possible gusts, and maybe some small hail along the interstate corridor, especially near exits 244 through 250. Again, that's expected just after 2 a.m. The digital clock in the corner of the TV screen read 2:14. The clock on the wall still read 2:17. His phone finally flickered back to life, just for a second. The lock screen showed the date. 10 years earlier. The same night printed on the calendar. Then it went dark again, as if it had never been on. Miguel's heart pounded so loud he could almost hear it over the murmur of the diner. He looked around more carefully now. No one in the room was using a smartphone. There were no glowing screens, no earpieces. Newspapers lay neatly folded on a rack near the door. The headlines, as far as he could see from here, were the ones he remembered from that autumn local election races, a construction project that had never quite happened. At the corner booth, a woman laughed too loudly. Miguel realized he'd heard that laugh before, on another night, years ago, almost on cue between songs on the jukebox. The trucker beside her shook his head and repeated a line Miguel knew, word for word. Because he'd sat at that very booth once and heard it through a fog of exhaustion. It was like watching a memory play itself again, right down to the way Eileen wiped the same spot on the counter 3 times in a row, her gaze flicking toward the window each time the little bell on the door jingled with the arrival of a new customer. Except no new customers came in. The bell jingled once, softly, on its own. "Storm's going to hit any minute now," Eileen said, refilling his cup without looking. "You think about grabbing a room on the house for first-timers." Miguel opened his mouth to protest he'd been here before, many times, but the words snagged in his throat. First-timers. He remembered the first night he'd stopped at the Horizon. Nervous, still getting used to the size of his rig, half convinced he was going to wash out before the month was over. Eileen had said those exact words then, pressing a room key into his hand with a smile. On the house, for first-timers. He'd woken to the sound of distant sirens and heavy rain before dawn. By the time he'd gotten back on the road, the accident had already happened. The detours had already been set. Now, the same key lay on the counter in front of him, its dull brass tag stamped with the number 3. "Just down the hall, last door on the left," she said. "You get some rest. Roads aren't going anywhere." Miguel's fingers didn't move. From somewhere outside, so faint he almost thought he imagined it, came the sound of a truck's air horn, long and hollow, swallowed quickly by distance. The diner's lights flickered once. The second hand on the wall clock twitched. "Arden Schitziefen. Arden Schitziefen. Arden Schitziefen." Miguel slid off the stool. "Actually," he said, forcing casualness into his voice, "I should probably keep moving. Got a delivery window I can't miss. Maybe next time." Eileen's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes did a small, sad understanding, like someone watching a bird fly toward a window. "Suit yourself," she said softly. "Coffee's on the house then, for old time's sake." He left a few bills on the counter out of habit. The paper felt oddly thick and brittle under his fingers. As he turned toward the door, he caught his reflection in the window. For a split second, another version of himself seemed to be sitting at the counter, a younger man, thinner, with a different jacket, staring up at the TV with bleary eyes. Then he blinked, and the image smoothed into just his own face, drawn and tired. The bell on the door jingled as he stepped outside. The temperature felt different, colder, sharper, as if the air itself had thinned. The sky remained clear, but a line of clouds had formed low on the horizon, too straight, like a mark drawn with a ruler. Miguel walked quickly to his truck. As he climbed into the cab, his CB crackled, the first live sound it had made in an hour. "El, you with me?" The voice was his dispatcher's, tight with static, and something like worry. Miguel grabbed the mic. "Yeah, I'm here." "Where'd you go?" the dispatcher demanded. "You dropped off GPS for 20 minutes. 1 second you're at mile 243. Next second you're back on the main at 248. You take a detour?" Miguel looked in his mirror. The horizon stood where he'd left it. The blue sign hummed. The windows glowed. And, layered faintly over the stillness, like a sound from very far away, came the rising wail of sirens. His throat felt dry. "Negative," he said. "Just, must have been a bad patch for the signal." "Keep it tight then," the dispatcher replied. "Weather's supposed to be clear, but you know how they get it wrong. Call if you see anything." The channel went quiet. Miguel put the truck in gear. For a brief moment, he hesitated. Just long enough to feel the weight of the moment pressing in on him, the warmth of the diner, the familiarity, the way the world outside had seemed thinner, less stable. Then he pulled out. As his rig rolled back toward the exit road, the sign at the lot's edge flickered. The blue letters dimmed, brightened, then dimmed again. The air felt heavier, as if he were driving through invisible water. At the top of the ramp, he glanced one last time in the mirror. For a heartbeat, the horizon looked different. The lights were out. The windows were dark. The pumps stood under a sign whose blue paint was stripped and peeling. A high chain-link fence ringed the property, topped with faded warning signs that snapped weakly in the wind. Weeds clawed through cracks in the pavement. The building slumped under years of neglect. The shell of the Horizon pit stop, exactly as it should have been. Miguel's headlights caught a yellow placard by the entrance as he merged back onto the interstate. Cleanup complete. Site closed. Do not enter. At the bottom, in small print, was the date. 10 years earlier. The same month, the same day, the same time stamped on the calendar over the Horizon's register. The hands of his own dashboard clock jumped forward 20 minutes in a blink. His phone buzzed violently back to life, screen flooding with backlog notifications, missed calls. A weather alert that mentioned nothing more than mild wind. He drove on. Later, at another truck stop miles down the road, he asked an older driver if he remembered the Horizon pit stop. Out by 247, the man said, stirring sugar into his coffee. Yeah, we all used to go there, before the spill. You ever stop there? Miguel asked carefully. After it closed? The man gave him a puzzled look. There is no after it closed, he said. They shut it down hard. Fenced it, leveled half of it. Nothing left but the sign and the pumps. Far as I know. Why? Miguel shook his head. Just asking. That night, alone in his bunk, he thought back over every detail, the frozen clock, the date on the calendar, the way conversations had looped, exactly as he remembered, but never moved forward. A place caught in the last few minutes before everything changed, repeating the same sliver of time until someone stepped in to join it. A warm, familiar room that didn't want to be forgotten, and didn't want to let go of anyone who sat down for one last cup of coffee. From then on, whenever his route took him near exit 247 on quiet nights, Miguel kept his eyes carefully on the road ahead. The Horizon sign, if it was ever lit, would have to glow for someone else. Still, every now and then, when the air had that strange weight to it, and the night seemed just a little too still, he swore he could catch a faint blue shimmer way out over the fields, right where the exit bent away from the main line. And on those nights, his dashboard clock would hesitate, just a fraction of a second, at 2:17 a.m., before ticking on. Story number 4. Andre wasn't the kind of driver who liked new gadgets. He came from the era of paper logs, disposable cameras, and CB chatter. He'd watched the industry change around him: electronic logs, in-cab tablets, dash cameras, GPS that second-guessed every turn. He'd adjusted because that's what you did if you wanted to keep rolling. But he never quite trusted the screens that glowed back at him from the dash. The latest edition was different, though. It came in a gray plastic housing about the size of a paperback, mounted just above his steering wheel. A single ring of soft blue light circled its edge, pulsing when it thought. A little camera lens in the middle watched the road, and when it wanted, his face. The company called it Guardian. Corporate had sent a glossy brochure. Real-time collision avoidance, fatigue monitoring, predictive hazard alerts powered by millions of data points. The safety manager, Wanda, had been excited in a way that made Andre feel exhausted. This thing's going to save lives, she'd said at the safety meeting. Eyes on the road, hands on the wheel, brain in the game. Guardian will nudge you if you drift, warn you if something's in your blind spot. It even learns your driving style. It talk too? Someone had asked. Wanda smiled. Gentle voice prompts only. Think of it as a helpful co-pilot that never gets tired. Andre had thought, that's exactly what I don't want. Still, he signed the waiver and let the shop guys wire it into his truck. They pointed out the manual override, a little breaker switch in the fuse panel, just in case, and sent him on his next run. For the first 2 nights, Guardian behaved. It chimed softly if he drifted too close to the shoulder rumble strips. It gave pleasant, almost soothing announcements. Caution. Vehicle ahead is slowing. Construction zone in 2 miles. Reduce speed. Its voice was neutral, not quite male or female, with no accent he could place. At first, he flinched every time it spoke. By the end of the second night, he barely noticed. The third night was when it changed. He was hauling light freight westbound, a long run that would take him across open plains and into a sparse patch of the desert before dawn. The sky was clear. The moon was thin. The road ahead shone in his headlights like a ribbon of brushed steel, stretching into nowhere. The first odd warning came just before midnight. Caution, Guardian said calmly. Debris in right lane in 0.5 miles. Andre checked his mirrors. The highway behind him was empty. The GPS on his dash showed no construction zones ahead, no flagged incidents. "Where'd you get that, huh?" he muttered. The blue ring around the device pulsed once, then went still. He kept his speed steady. At exactly the half-mile mark, his headlights picked up something in the right lane. A long, thin shape, darker than the asphalt. A blown-out truck tire stretched across the lines. He eased left without thinking, gliding past it with plenty of room. If he'd been in a heavier traffic flow, or half asleep, that could have been trouble. "Debris cleared," Guardian said. "Thank you." Andre's fingers tightened on the wheel. Plenty of tech systems could detect objects now. Sensors, cameras, AI. They could see farther, react quicker. He knew that as well as anyone, but there was something about the timing, the way it had warned him at a distance that felt personal. Not a generic beep, not a vague hazard ahead, but a specific mention, down to the fraction of a mile. "Lucky guess," he said, more to himself than the machine. For the next hour, Guardian stayed quiet. The road unwound. The world outside the windshield turned into a moving painting of empty landmasses and starlit sky. Then, at 1:13 a.m., it chimed again. "Alert," it said. "Unsecured passenger. Please fasten passenger seatbelt." Andre's brow furrowed. The passenger seat was empty. It had been empty all night. As far as he knew, the interior camera didn't even aim at that side of the cab. Guardian had been sold as something that focused on the driver's eyes, the road ahead. He glanced over anyway. Nothing. Just his worn duffel on the floor and the seat itself. A faint impression in the cushion where people had sat over the years. His jacket hung from the hook behind it, sleeve swinging gently with the truck's motion. "False alarm," he said. "You're seeing my bag or something." Guardian's blue ring glowed brighter for a moment. "Unsecured passenger," it repeated just as calm. "Please fasten passenger seatbelt." Andre reached up and adjusted the little interior camera, angling it more directly at his own face. "There," he said. "Just me." The device stayed quiet. He drove on, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling that had crawled up his spine. Outside, the landscape flattened further. Isolated lights from far-off farms dotted the blackness like ship lanterns on a dark sea. The highway signs grew less frequent. He passed a rest area that looked almost deserted, its sodium lights buzzing over a lonely row of empty parking spaces. At 1:30 a.m., Guardian spoke again. "Recommend break in 15 minutes, it said. Signs of fatigue detected. Andre blinked. "I'm fine," he answered, out of habit. No red eyes, no yawning. "We doing this by the book now?" "Recommend break in 15 minutes, it repeated. Safe turnout available ahead. He checked the next exit on his GPS. It showed a truck stop in 30 miles, nothing before that. "Where?" he asked. Guardian didn't respond. The blue ring dimmed. He considered ignoring it. He still had legal drive hours left. He didn't feel particularly tired, just the usual dullness of a late run. But then he remembered the tire in the lane. The way the machine had caught it before his own eyes did. "Fine," he muttered. 15 minutes. 14 minutes later, a small brown sign appeared on the shoulder. Scenic View Area. 1 mile. He'd forgotten those existed along this stretch. A simple turnout with a railing, maybe a plaque. A place tourists stopped during the day to take pictures. "Safe turnout ahead," Guardian said. "Please reduce speed." Andre signaled and eased into the right lane. The Scenic View area was smaller than he expected. Just a widened shoulder offset from the road, a low barrier, and a short drop into desert scrub. No bathrooms, no lights. The only illumination came from his own lamps and the faint glow of stars. He pulled in anyway and set his brakes. The instant the engine's roar faded to idle, the silence rushed in. It was deep and wide, pressing against the windows. No wind, no insect noise, no distant traffic. Just the soft tick of cooling metal. Andre sat for a moment, listening to his own breathing. "What now?" he asked the device. "You gonna tell me a bedtime story?" Guardian's blue ring pulsed. "No," it said. "Look." It was the first time it had said anything that wasn't in its pre-programmed script. Andre frowned. "Look where?" he asked. The blue light brightened, then dimmed, like an eye narrowing at the road ahead. Andre turned his head. Far down the highway, maybe a mile or two beyond the turnout, something flashed just for an instant. A sudden white flare on the horizon, then darkness again. A second later, faint and delayed, came the low roll of a sound. Not quite thunder, not quite anything he could easily name. A heavy, muffled thump that seemed to arrive through the ground as much as through the air. He squinted. No more flashes came. The road lay quiet and black, stretching east and west. His hand drifted toward the door handle. For no good reason, it stopped halfway. "What was that?" he asked. Guardian stayed silent. After a minute, Andre released the brakes and pulled back onto the highway. His headlights carved through the dark, filling the void with familiar, solid shapes. When he reached the stretch of road where the sound had seemed to come from, he saw nothing. No stalled vehicles. No flicker of emergency lights. The pavement was unmarked. His radio crackled. "Anybody else feel that?" a voice asked faintly. "Like something under the road?" Another driver answered, their voice fuzzed by static. "Yeah, man. Thought it was just my rig. Everything's reading normal, though." Andre's grip on the wheel tightened. He glanced at Guardian. Its blue ring glowed steady and soft, as if it hadn't spoken out of turn at all. The hours slid by. The warnings grew stranger. At mile marker 162, Guardian announced, "Danger, hazard, in left mirror." Andre checked his mirror. The only thing there was his own trailer, a long, pale rectangle worrying the darkness. "No hazard," he said. The blue ring brightened, insistent. He looked again. This time, for just a heartbeat, he thought he saw a smear of darker shadow clinging to the side of the trailer, like a handprint too large to belong to any person. Then the angle shifted, the road curved slightly, and the illusion vanished. "Adjust lane position," Guardian said mildly. "Thank you." He moved a few inches right, if only to stop the device from chiming at him. At mile 173, it said, "Fog ahead." There was none. But a minute later, a low, thin mist began to slide across the asphalt, glowing silver in his lights. It wasn't thick enough to be dangerous, just enough to blur the edges of the world. Andre's mind kept circling back to the passenger seat warning. He found himself glancing at the empty space more often, expecting to see something, an outline, a reflection caught wrong. Sometimes, in the corner of his eye, he almost did a sense of weight, like someone sitting very still. Guardian seemed to be watching it too. "Unsecured passenger," it said again quietly at 2:04 a.m. "Please fasten passenger seatbelt." "There's no passenger," Andre said, more sharply than he intended. "Just me. You're confused." The blue light pulsed rapidly, then steadied. "Passenger," it said. But this time, the words sounded softer, as if the speakers were a little farther away. "Passenger," returned. Andre exhaled slowly. He knew why that scraped at him more than it should have. There had been an accident, years back. Not in this truck, not with this company, but in another life, another run, on a mountain road in bad weather. A pickup had lost control in front of him. He'd done everything right, eased, braked, kept his rig upright. But one of the cars in the next lane hadn't been so lucky. He didn't talk about it. There hadn't been anything to say. Weather, speed, reaction times. Officially, he had done nothing wrong. Unofficially, there were some nights when the sound of twisting metal replayed behind his eyes as he tried to fall asleep. The passenger in that car had not made it. He shoved the thought away. "You didn't learn that from anyone here," he said to Guardian quietly. "My logs don't have that. Company files don't have that." The device said nothing. Just as he was beginning to think it had glitched back into its normal script, a new phrase scrolled briefly across the small display under the ring, glowing faintly in blue letters. Replaying critical event. The words vanished before he could be certain he'd read them right. The road narrowed. His GPS, which had tracked his progress faithfully all night, blinked and redrew his position 3 times in quick succession, as if it couldn't quite decide which mile marker he'd just passed. The map zoomed out, then in, then froze. "Rerouting," Guardian said. That was new. It wasn't tied to his navigation system, at least not as far as he knew. Wanda had said it didn't control routing. Just warnings. "Rerouting?" Andre repeated. "To where?" "Safer route available," Guardian said. Upcoming exit, 2 miles. The GPS showed no exit in 2 miles. The next one it listed was 8 miles ahead, a small town turnoff he used often. Negative, Andre said. We're fine on this road. Upcoming exit, Guardian repeated. 2 miles. Recommended. The blue light brightened, like an eye wide open. Andre squinted into the distance. A green standard exit sign appeared sooner than his memory said it should have. Whiteford RD. Exit 221. He was almost sure that shouldn't be here. He'd run this stretch too many times to misremember a whole exit. The sign pointed to a narrow ramp that descended into darkness. No visible town lights beyond. No gas logos or food symbols. His better judgment, honed by years and miles, told him to stay on the main line. The memory of the tire in the road, the fog, the unseen thump on the highway whispered. It's been right before. His hands tightened, one on the wheel, one hovering over the turn signal. Upcoming exit, Guardian said softly. Please take ramp. Accident ahead if route is not adjusted. There it was, laid out plain. Andre had heard stories of systems that could see wrecks before the human eye could, read patterns in traffic data. But out here, traffic was nearly non-existent. His radio was quiet. No weather alerts buzzed his phone. Define accident, he said. Guardian's light pulsed once, then twice, rhythm like a slow heartbeat. Critical event, it said, similar to previous. A cold sweat broke along the back of his neck. He had never told anyone at this company about the old crash. Never uploaded old dashcam footage. The truck from that night was long out of service, sold or scrapped. He reached for the turn signal. His finger hesitated. Then, through the open window crack, he caught a scent on the night air hot rubber, the faint sharpness of overheated brakes. Not from his truck. He flicked the signal and took the ramp. The exit road was narrow, more like a service road than a proper off-ramp. It curved around the base of a low hill, then straightened. After a few hundred yards, it came to an unmarked crossroads. No stop sign, no light, just a choice. Left into deeper dark, right toward a faint, dull orange glow. Turn right, Guardian said. It did. The orange glow turned into a hazy reflection of distant town lights. Eventually, the road looped gently back toward the main highway. As he approached the on-ramp, a line of red and white flickers appeared above the embankment emergency beacons. He crept up the incline. At the top, he could see it. The tail end of a backup, hazard lights winking like a second string of stars. A cluster of vehicles slowed to a stop behind a tangle of flashing cruisers. Far ahead, past the curve, something large and dark blocked both lanes. The silhouettes of tow trucks and responders worked under glare. A bad wreck. Fresh. Andre sat there for a long moment at the top of the ramp, watching the scene. Then he eased his truck onto the shoulder, away from the flow of traffic, and took a breath that felt like waking up. Guardian's blue ring dimmed, very slowly, like an exhale. Reroute successful, it said quietly. Behind the neutral tone, he thought he heard something else, relief, or the echo of an emotion the machine wasn't supposed to have. You knew, Andre said under his breath. Somehow, you knew that was coming. The device didn't answer. When traffic started to move again, he merged back onto the interstate. The delay would cost him some time, but not as much as being trapped in the middle of it. For an hour, Guardian said nothing. The road returned to its familiar hum. The stars shifted overhead. Just when Andre began to believe the night might settle, it spoke again. Unsecured passenger, it murmured. Please fasten passenger seatbelt. He glanced over, tired of the dance. This time, the passenger seat wasn't quite empty. There was nothing solid there, no body, no face, but the air above the cushion looked with thicker. A faint distortion, like heat waves over asphalt. His hanging jacket sleeve was pressed inward, as if pushed by a weight. Andre's chest tightened. Seat's empty, he said too calmly. The blue light brightened. The device made a tiny adjusting sound, as if its internal camera were focusing. On the small screen beneath the ring, for the briefest moment, an image flickered. It showed the interior of his cab from Guardian's perspective. Andre at the wheel, dashboard lights glowing, windshield framing the road ahead, and in the passenger seat, a shape human-sized, hunched, more shadow than person, edges blurred. Where a face should have been, there was only a deeper darkness. The image vanished almost as soon as he registered it. Andre's heart hammered. He reached over and snapped open the fuse panel cover. His safest, most grounded instincts kicked in. If a piece of equipment behaves in ways you don't understand, you disconnect power. He located the small, labeled breaker. Gordian unit. He flipped it down. The blue ring went dark. The faint hum from the device died. The cab felt suddenly emptier and larger, without that small, steady presence. Relief washed through him. It lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then every gauge on his dash flickered. The instrument cluster lights dimmed and brightened again. The radio cut out, then came back with a burst of static. The truck itself kept running fine, engine smooth, steering normal, but the electronics jittered like a nervous system without its spine. Outside, the world seemed to slip sideways a fraction. The stars looked slightly out of place. The reflective lines on the road shimmered. Far ahead, a green exit sign that should have been 2 miles away loomed suddenly close. Letters too sharp, too bright. Andre blinked hard and checked his mirrors. The trailer was where it should be. The highway behind him stretched straight, unbroken. He flipped the breaker back up. Guardian's ring snapped to life, blazing blue for a second before settling. Connection restored, it said calmly. Please do not disconnect power while in motion. Andre swallowed. What are you exactly? He asked. Collision avoidance and driver assistance system, it replied, as if reading from its brochure. Designed to reduce critical events, this unit has recorded 912 near misses and 37 confirmed collisions. He cut it off with a small wave of his hand, though it couldn't see that. How many drivers have you ridden with? He asked. 17, Guardian answered. 6 still active in company fleet. What happened to the others? Silence. Then softly, critical events. Andre's knuckles whitened on the wheel. Behind his irritation and fear, another thought had begun to form, unwelcome and persistent. The feeling that, somewhere along the line, the machine's purpose had shifted. That now, more than avoiding accidents, it was intent on replaying one, or finishing one that had never quite ended. The rest of the run passed in a thin, strained quiet. Guardian issued only standard warnings. Caution, curve ahead, reduce speed, construction zone. No more mentions of passengers, no more predictive reroutes. When the first thin line of dawn appeared in the east, painting the sky in gray and pale blue, Andre felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He rolled into the receiver's yard, bone-tired, but intact. After the unload, he headed straight back to the company terminal, not caring that he was early for his scheduled break. The shop was already buzzing. Mechanics moved between bays. The smell of oil and rubber hung in the air. Wanda saw him through the glass of her office and came out, coffee in hand. You're back quick, she said. Everything all right? I want that thing off my truck, Andre said, nodding toward the Guardian unit. His voice was flat, leaving no room for argument. She blinked. Did it malfunction? Throw a fault code? He hesitated, then chose his words carefully. It gave me some very specific warnings about things it shouldn't have known, and it's picking up something in the cab that isn't there. I'm not driving another mile with it. Wanda's enthusiasm dimmed. For a moment, the safety manager mask slipped, revealing simple concern. You're not the first to say that, she admitted quietly. We've had a couple of drivers report odd behavior. It's hard to separate that from normal resistance to new tech. But if it's spooking you, we'll pull it and send it back. She flagged down one of the techs, a young guy with grease on his hands and safety glasses on his head. Hey, Eli, she called. Unit off truck 384. Drivers reporting anomalies. Tag it for diagnostics. Eli climbed into the cab and shut the door. Andre waited outside, the cool morning air brushing his face. He watched birds circle over the yard's light poles, watched sunlight creep over the top of his trailer. After a few minutes, Eli hopped down, carrying the Guardian unit in both hands, like something fragile. Pulled clean, he said. Truck's electronics stopped flickering right away. I'll put this on the bench. As he walked past Andre, the blue ring supposedly powered down gave a tiny, almost imperceptible pulse of light. Andre didn't mention it. Later that day, unable to fully let it go, he stopped by the small room the shop used, as an electronics bench. Racks of old radios, GPS units, and dash cams lined the walls. On the central table, the Guardian unit from his truck sat connected to a diagnostic laptop, cables running from its ports. Eli sat nearby, scrolling through lines of code and log files. "Find anything?" Andre asked. The tech shrugged. "Depends what you mean by anything," he said. "It logged a couple of anomalies last night. Passenger presence detection flagged. Route variance. But the sensor calibrations check out. It's like it's seeing something you're not." Andre's jaw tightened. "You ever pull one of these out before?" he asked. "From another truck?" "Yeah," Eli said. "We've shuffled a few units around. This particular one came off a tractor that got totaled last year, rear-ended in the fog. Other guy's fault, but it still messed up the frame." Andre shifted his weight. "Driver make it?" Eli's fingers paused over the keyboard. "Yeah," he said after a second. "Driver walked away. Passenger didn't." He shrugged uncomfortably. "They salvaged what they could from the cab, including this. Didn't see the harm." Andre stared at the unit. The blue ring was dark now. The camera lens looked back at him, just glass and electronics, hollow. "Can you wipe it?" Andre asked quietly. "Not just settings, everything, like it never rode with anyone." Eli nodded slowly. "We can try. Full factory reset, then some." "Why?" Andre considered the easiest answer. "Because it feels like it remembers more than it should," he said. That night, parked at a busy, well-lit truck stop, he lay in his sleeper with the curtains closed. The sounds outside were familiar and grounding. Idling engines, laughter, the hiss of air brakes, a muffled TV from a neighboring cab. His own dashboard was dark. No blue ring glowed from above the wheel. No camera watched him. He should have slept easily. Instead, he found himself listening for a voice that wasn't there. Caution. Debris in right lane. Unsecured passenger. Upcoming exit. Recommended. Hours later, he did fall asleep. His dream took him to a highway in the rain, to brake lights blooming red in the mist, to the shape of a car turned wrong in the wrong lane. But this time, as he rounded the bend, a small, calm voice spoke from nowhere. Rerouting. And when he woke, heart racing, he was still in his bunk. The truck was still. The only light came from a distant security lamp, glowing around the edges of his curtain. In the maintenance room back at the yard, the Guardian unit sat on the bench, disconnected from everything. If anyone had been there to watch closely in the small hours before dawn, they might have seen its blue ring flicker once, faintly, then go still. For a brief instant, the internal memory screen glowed with an image captured not from a forward-facing road camera, but from the interior one. A driver's seat, empty. A passenger seat, empty. And between them, hanging in the air like a faint echo, the vague impression of someone half turned toward the windshield, as if deciding whether to leave. The image blinked off. Somewhere, far from any terminal or office, a truck rolled down a quiet highway without a co-pilot, human or machine. Its driver watched the road with his own tired eyes, listening only to the soft rhythm of the engine and his own thoughts. But every once in a while, when he checked his mirrors, Andre couldn't quite shake the feeling that someone was sitting in the passenger seat, very still, finally content just to ride along. Story number 5. Jace liked the desert runs. A lot of drivers hated them, too empty, too quiet, no landmarks but scrub and rock. For Jace, though, the long, straight stretches and wide horizons felt honest. No surprise merges, no sudden traffic jams, just miles of road, a sky like an upside-down ocean, and time to think. He was ex-military. Years earlier, he'd driven supply trucks in a part of the world where the landscape looked not so different from this one. Heat, dust, long columns of vehicles crawling through emptiness. The civilian highway system felt tame by comparison. That night, his run took him across the southwest. A late load headed toward a distribution center on the far side of the state. Dispatch had planned his route along the main interstate, but an earlier wreck had closed a key stretch. The GPS on his dash chimed as the detour pushed through. Recalculating route, he glanced at the new pink line on the map. It dragged him off the comfort of the wide, well-lit interstate and down onto an older two-lane that paralleled it miles away. USA 19. He frowned. He hadn't taken 19 inches years. A lot of truckers avoided it at night if they could. The pavement was fine. but it ran close to an old decommissioned testing range and a shuttered base. You could still see the silhouettes of antenna towers and fuel tanks out there in the distance sometimes, like the bones of a giant animal half buried in sand. Jace had done a few loads that way when he was younger, trying to save time. The road had never done anything to him, but it had a reputation in stories, traded over burgers and third cups of coffee. Strange lights. Radios picking up chatter on dead channels. The usual. He'd been around enough real danger not to spook easy. "All right, 19, he muttered. "One night only." He took the exit when it came, watching the big green interstate sign fall away in his mirror as he dropped onto the narrower highway. The asphalt here was older, more cracked. The reflectors along the shoulder were fewer and farther between. His headlights punched a tunnel through it, and everything outside the beam turned to ink. The clock on his dash read 11:42 p.m. His fuel was good. His hours were legal. The air through the cracked window had that dry, slightly metallic chill that deserts got at night after the heat bled away into the sky. For a while, there was nothing to it. Just road. The GPS showed his little arrow crawling calmly along the pink line. A few scattered ranch driveways appeared, marked only by mailboxes and distant porch lights. Once, he passed a rusted sign for a roadside attraction that had clearly been gone for years. Dinosaur World and Petting Zoo, an arrow pointing into blackness. His radio was mostly static. A late-night DJ in another state muttered between songs, his words too chewed by distance to fully make out. Jay settled in, hands loose on the wheel, eyes scanning the edge of his lights. A rhythm set in. White line, broken line, white line, broken line. Around midnight, he saw another set of lights far ahead. At first, they were only a faint reddish shimmer on the horizon taillights, low and paired, like a truck or maybe a set of cars. Out here, that was comforting. Company on the road meant help, if help was ever needed. As the distance closed, the lights didn't grow as quickly as he expected. He'd done the mental math by habit. He was cruising pretty steady, faster than whoever was out ahead. He should have been on their bumper within a few minutes. But the gap stayed stubbornly the same. He nudged the accelerator a little, taking the speed up a notch. The engine note barely changed. The road remained empty to either side. The red glow ahead seemed to slide backward, just enough to stay out of reach. "Huh," he breathed. The GPS didn't show any vehicle icons around, just his own arrow on a lonely road. After a while, the lights ahead shifted, multiplying. 2 taillights became 4, then 6, then more. A line of them, staggered, stringing along the curve of the highway. Jace realized he was following a convoy. From this distance, in the dips and rises of the land, all he could see were the dots of red. But something about the spacing, the slightly imperfect alignment, told him they weren't modern rigs with identical LED patterns. These were older vehicles, probably military transports, if he had to guess. Made sense, given the area. Even decommissioned ranges and shuttered bases had support convoys rolling through sometimes, moving old equipment, closing things down. He clicked his CB up a channel. "Convoy on 19 eastbound. This is southbound, Jace, behind you," he said, habit from years ago kicking in. "What's your speed up there, drivers?" Only static answered. No one owed him a reply, of course. But usually someone in a group would at least bounce back a "holding at 45" or "we're crawling, go around when you can, big guy." He tried again on a different channel. Same response. The red dots held their distance, neither falling back nor pulling away. Eventually, the road straightened enough that his headlights began to catch the last vehicle directly. Its taillights glowed dull red, old-style bulbs, not bright LEDs. As he drew closer, the shape around those lights came into focus. It wasn't a modern semi. It was a boxy, canvas-top truck, the kind he'd driven in the Army. A 1.5 deuce, long hood, flat windshield, squared edges, faded olive drab paint. His grip on the wheel tightened. As his high beams washed over it, he expected at least some reflection from metal surfaces, a glint off a mirror, a flash from a bumper. There was less than there should have been. The whole vehicle looked slightly blurred around the edges, as if he were seeing it through heat waves. "Must be the air," he muttered. "Temperature differential." He clicked off his brights so he wouldn't blast the driver's mirrors. Protocol was protocol. even out here. The convoy maintained a steady, stubborn speed about 45, just like he'd guessed. Jace could easily run faster, but the narrowness of 19 and the uncertain behavior of the column ahead kept him where he was for the moment. He reached for the CB again. "Lead truck in the convoy on 19, he tried. "You got a copy from the semi behind you?" This time, after a long crackle, a voice answered. "Copy that," it said, faint and hollow. "Convoy, actual reading you. Identify." The cadence of it dropped Jace straight back into another life. Clipped, practiced, with that particular tone soldiers used when they were on duty and very aware of it. The audio quality was rough enough that it could have been an old tape. "Name's Jace," he said, feeling suddenly foolish for using his civilian handle. "Commercial tractor, trailer behind you. Your tail gunner's running pretty slow." Silence hissed across the channel. Then, "Roger, Jace. Maintain distance. Do not attempt to pass. Road ahead is compromised." The phrasing was pure field manual. Jace's eyes flicked to the GPS. It showed nothing unusual ahead. No accidents, no closures, no alerts. Just 30-odd miles of two-lane before his connection back to the larger net. "What kind of compromise, convoy?" he asked, forcing a lightness he didn't feel. "Construction? Washout? Stand by," the voice said. The channel went quiet. A prickling unease crawled along the back of Jace's neck. He lowered his window a little, tasting the night air. It was cool and dry, with a faint tang of old creosote from the guardrail timbers. No hint of dust storms, no smell of rain. His headlights rode the gap between his hood and the last deuce and a half. In his side view, he could make out more of the column ahead now. 3, 4, 5 trucks, all of the same type, all with that slight blur. As his eyes adjusted, he noticed something else. Their markings. White stenciled unit numbers adorned their tailgates and bumpers. Some had faded symbols, triangles, and circles. One bore a spray-painted note near the rear. Crooked and half-scrubbed. "Keep moving." He'd seen pictures like that in old training manuals. Convoys from decades ago. Vietnam? Maybe. Early Middle East deployments? Long before his time. A memory flickered. Back in basic, an instructor had pointed to a grainy black and white photograph tacked to a corkboard. A line of trucks on a dirt road. A faint smudge on the horizon. The caption had read, 19th Transport, final movement before incident. He couldn't remember the details now. Just that it had been a cautionary tale about navigation errors and low visibility conditions, coordination failures, and the cost of assuming the map matched the ground. "Convoy actual, what's your destination?" Jace asked. Static answered. Then, faintly, "Same as always. Checkpoint Echo. You're out of place, civilian." The word civilian landed oddly hard. Jace cleared his throat. "My nav's got me routed east to Fairmont Distribution. I'm not seeing any checkpoints on this road, friend." "Your nav," the voice repeated, almost musing. "Last time we had one of those tell us where to go, it walked us off the map. There was something wrong with the timestamp on the transmission." Jace glanced at the small digital indicator on his CB. For a split second, instead of the usual numbers, he thought he saw all zeros. He told himself he was tired. The red lights ahead bobbed gently as the convoy dipped and rose over shallow grades. The distance between each vehicle never changed. It was perfect. Too perfect. No one held that kind of exact spacing on a rolling road, not for long. Drivers got distracted. Engines lagged. Someone rode the brake a hair too much. "What range are you running?" Jace asked casually. "FM? Some kind of private band? I'm barely picking you up." "Direct," the voice replied. "Line of sight. Don't fall back. Don't push forward. Just follow. Road ahead isn't where you think it is." To his right, out beyond the edge of the shoulder, the desert rolled in low waves. The outline of the old testing range's structures stood faint and skeletal in the distance. Something flickered above them, a brief wash of pale light across the sky, there and gone so fast he wasn't sure he'd seen it. The GPS chirped. "Route update. Turn right in 0.3 miles. There's no turn," Jace muttered. "Come on." The highlighted pink line on the map now showed a right-angle jog across blank space, a road that wasn't on any of the physical green signs. He zoomed the map out. The picture scrambled, then redrew, now with a thin gray line appearing where none had been before, connecting 19 to some smaller county route, then looping back toward his original path. His hands tightened. "Convoy actual," he said slowly. "I've got a system telling me to get off this road. That what you mean by road ahead isn't where I think it is." A long pause. "Negative," the voice said at last. "Your system's trying to correct. It doesn't see what we see." Our map ended. "Sometime back." Jay swallowed. "Sometime back when?" he asked. Static rose, whispery and insistent. "Last report, we were in a whiteout," the voice said. "Far away now, like sound coming through a long metal pipe. Sand in the intake. Orders were to hold formation, push through. GPS said we were on the line. Horizon said otherwise." Jace's own horizon was clear as glass. He checked his clock. 12:24 a.m. The red taillights ahead flickered. For a heartbeat, they doubled, tripled, as if he were seeing not just one set but several, layered over each other, slightly misaligned in time. A chill traced his spine. He'd heard about that convoy again years later, he realized. Not in training, but in a late-night story session between older drivers. A military column caught in a freak sandstorm, out near an old range. Half the vehicles had strayed onto an unmarked wash. A few had gone down when the ground gave way under their weight. No graphic details, just a quietly spoken, "They never found all of them. Desert keeps what it wants." He hadn't connected it to USS 19 then. Now, the pieces lined up in ways he didn't like. The GPS insisted on that right turn less than a quarter mile ahead. "Turn right, turn right." The soft voice from his truck's speakers repeated the command with pleasant urgency. The pink line blinked. "Convoy actual," Jace said, his own voice low. "If I stay behind you, where does this road go? For you?" Silence. Out of the corner of his eye, to his right, he thought he saw motion in the darkness parallel to the road, more taillights maybe, offset at a strange angle, as if another set of vehicles were crossing their path in some different layer of night. Suddenly, the voice on the radio didn't sound quite like one person. It layered. "You're not in our order," it said, not quite in sync with itself. Multiple versions speaking the same words a fraction of a second apart. "You don't belong in this column. This is our road. Has been for a long time." His headlights scanned the left shoulder. There was nowhere safe to pull off. No wide gravel, no emergency lane. Just a narrow strip before it fell away into scrub. "Copy that," Jace said softly. "Then maybe I should stop shadowing you. For your own safety, maintain distance," the voice insisted. "Ahead isn't fixed. We've been trying to find the way out." There was something in those last words that hit him harder than the rest. A rawness, tiredness beyond exhaustion. The GPS pinged again. "Turn right now." Up ahead, just barely within his headlight wash, a dusty little side road angled off to the south. No sign. Just a break in the low scrub and a couple of old tire tracks, silvered in the moon. His map said, "This way." The convoy said, "Stay." He eased off the throttle. The column ahead kept its perfect pace. If he followed them, chances were he'd simply crawl along at 45 for another 30 miles, burn some more hours, and arrive a little late. That was the rational view. Ignore the spooky. Give the spectral soldiers their distance. Keep on the main line. Something in his gut nodded. Another thought whispered, what if following them wasn't following at all? What if the road they were on wasn't entirely his road anymore? "You said your map ended," Jace said quietly. "What's beyond that for you?" The radio crackled. For a second, he thought he heard wind screaming through metal, voices shouting over each other, the distinct, too familiar crunch of something heavy going somewhere it wasn't designed to go. Then, very softly, as if from right behind him, another voice spoke. Not through the CB, but from the empty space of his cab. "Drop back," it said. "Don't get drawn into their lane." It sounded like his old platoon sergeant. Calm, certain. The man who'd taught him how to keep a truck upright on bad roads under worse conditions. Jace's heart lurched. He checked the mirrors. The cab was empty. Just his thermos, his hanging jacket, the faint ghost of his own face in the side glass. He didn't question it. He pulled his foot completely off the accelerator and feathered the brake, just enough to let the gap widen. The red lights ahead began to drift away. The CB hissed. "Maintain distance," the convoy voice called, now sounding almost alarmed. "Do not break formation. Road isn't stable." Their volume dropped as if someone were slowly turning down a dial. The last truck's taillights became dim pinpricks. At the same time, the side road to the right slid past his bumper. For a fraction of a second, in the angle of his headlights, he saw old tire ruts cut deep into the dirt there. Too deep. The kind of deep that came from weight sitting too long in ground that didn't want to hold it. Then it was behind him. He drove on, alone once more. The GPS recalculated, grumbled, then redrew a new path using 19, as if the side road had never existed. In his mirrors, he caught one last glimpse of the convoy. It was like looking backward in time. The old trucks, canvas tops shuddering in a wind he couldn't feel, silhouettes of helmets in the cabs. For an instant, as the last vehicle crested a small rise, its profile cut clean against the sky, he could see straight through the fabric sides, saw starlight where a solid cargo bed should have been. Then they were gone. Not by turning, not by cresting a hill, just gone. The road behind him was an empty ribbon of black under a cold, impassive sky. His CB stayed silent. His dash clock ticked over to 12:31 a.m., seconds advancing steady as any metronome. Jace drove in that quiet for a long time, the hum of his engine the only sound. Eventually, the outline of the old range installations dropped away behind low hills. The land flattened, and faint town glow appeared ahead like a smudge of light on the horizon. When he merged back onto the main artery highway an hour later, the comfort of multiple lanes and scattered traffic felt almost overwhelming. He called into dispatch, citing the detour and some weird routing on 19 as an excuse for being a little behind. The night dispatcher just grunted and marked the ETA. At the next truck stop, over coffee and the low background hum of late-night TV, he asked a couple of older drivers about that decommissioned area. "Used to be convoys up and down there all the time," one said. "Training runs. Night ops. Took a bad one, though, way back. Whole line of trucks got turned around in a storm. Couple went off a wash, if I remember right. Shut most of that down afterward. You ever see anything out there?" Jace asked. The man shrugged. "Sometimes you'll catch phantom lights," he said. "Looks like you're following somebody, but they never get any closer. I give 'em space. Let the dead have their lanes, I say." Jace didn't argue. He finished his coffee, went back to his truck, and climbed into the sleeper. That night, as he drifted in that gray borderland between awake and asleep, he thought he heard engines idling just outside his cab. Older engines, with that rough, uneven tone carburetors used to have. Men's voices traded low, practiced call and response. Convoy actual, count, 2 in, 3 in, 4, 5 in. A pause. Stray civilian dropped back, someone reported. Did not enter pattern. Another voice, the one that had sounded like his old sergeant, spoke with quiet satisfaction. "Good," it said. One less in the loop. When he woke, there was only the soft whine of someone's reefer unit nearby and the distant hiss of a shower in the truck stop. He rolled again at dawn. From then on, when his routes took him anywhere near USS 19 at night, Jace double-checked his GPS and then listened to his gut. If the neat little voice behind the digital map ever suggested a side road that hadn't been there in his memory, he stayed on the asphalt he knew. Every once in a while, though, when the sky was very clear and the land very flat, he'd glance off to the side and imagine he saw a thin line of red dots way out in the distance, moving in perfect unison across a part of the desert no ordinary road should have been. And though the air would be still, he'd roll his window up, just a little, as if to keep from hearing a voice on some old, forgotten frequency, asking him to fall in. Story number 6. The night Aaron crossed North Point Pass, the forecast said light flurries, and the traffic app showed a calm green line over the mountains. Every driver who knew that stretch understood how little that meant. North Point was one of those passes that could change its mind in minutes. Rain turned to sleet, sleet to snow, and snow to something worse. The grade was long, the curves were tight, and the drop off the side was the kind you didn't look at if you wanted to keep your hands steady. Erin had been over it half a dozen times, always during the day. Tonight was her first time in the dark. She watched the road signs carefully as her rig climbed. Chain area 10 miles. Then, chain area 5 miles. The yellow, chains required when flashing sign over the highway remained dark. Her dispatcher's last message still sat on her tablet. You're good. Road's clear. If it starts looking bad, just hit the chain up lot and wait it out. The higher she climbed, the more the rain changed. It thickened, streaks turning into bits of white that hit the windshield and smeared before the wipers cleared them. The outside temperature on the dash slid downward. 35 degrees Fahrenheit. 33. 31. Her headlights caught the first patch of slush on the shoulder. A minute later, the whole world beyond them had turned gray. The sign ahead flashed on. Chains required next 10 miles. Use turnout. As if in answer, the wind rose. Snow began to move sideways instead of down, sweeping across the beams of her headlights in fast, pale lines. All right, Erin murmured, more to steady herself than anything. We'll do this the right way. The chain-up area appeared around the next bend, a wide, flat turnout carved onto the mountainside, separated from the main road by a low concrete barrier. A faded blue sign announced North Point Chain Area, mile 178. She signaled and eased off the main line. Several trucks were already there, dark hulks, lined up nose to tail along the barrier. Their running lights glowed faintly through a skin of blowing snow. Engines idled low and steady. A dull chorus under the wind. No one stood outside. No hazard vests flickered. No chains rattled on the ground. Erin set her brakes and sat for a few seconds, letting her eyes adjust to the strange half-light. Snowflakes spun in tight circles where the wind caught them. The lot's single tall lamp burned a dull yellow, its light pushed down by the low, heavy sky. Beyond the concrete barrier, there was only darkness and the suggestion of empty space. She pulled on gloves and a hat and stepped out into the cold. The wind hit her hard, a knife-edged gust that drove tiny grains of ice against her cheeks. The snow here was already a couple of inches deep. Her boots left fresh, crisp prints that filled almost as soon as she lifted her foot. She moved quickly along the side of her truck, dragging the heavy chains from their box, laying them out by the drive tires. Breath steamed in front of her. The metal of the chains bit at her gloves as she worked them around the wheels. No one else got out. She could see them, the silhouettes of the other rigs, old Kenworths, a couple of flat-faced Volvos, one long-hooded Peterbilt with a faded red cab. Their windows were fogged from the inside. A radio somewhere played faint country music, muffled by glass and snow. Erin frowned. Usually, in a chain-up area on a night like this, there was a kind of unspoken camaraderie. People cursed the weather together, traded tools, checked on each other. Drivers didn't just sit in the warmth and let someone wrestle steel in the cold without at least a nod. She finished the last chain, cinched it tight, and straightened up, stretching her stiff back. Nice work. A voice crackled over her CV as she climbed back into the cab. Didn't think anyone still did that without complaining. The voice was male, older, with a dry rasp. Friendly enough, Erin settled into her seat, fingers numb inside her gloves. She reached for the mic. Figured I'd get it over with, she said. How's it looking up there? A chuckle came back. Snow. More snow. They closed the summit half an hour ago. Plows are stuck on the other side. Best to stay put till they open her back up. Erin glanced at her clock. 2:17 a.m. She hadn't realized it had gotten that late. Copy that, she said. You been here long? Long enough, he replied. You're the white Freightliner on the end, right? She looked in her mirror at her own reflection. White tractor, company logo on the door, trailer lights glowing red in the swirling snow. Yeah, she said slowly. That's me. Figured, the man said. Seen a lot of them cycle through this spot. A pause. Name's Ray. There was a familiarity in the way he said it, as if this conversation had already happened before. Erin rubbed her hands together. The cab heater hummed, pushing blessed warmth toward her feet. Outside, the snow thickened, a curtain closing around the chain-up lot. The highway beyond was now just a faint band of lighter gray. On the passenger side, her phone buzzed once, then lost its signal. The navigation app froze. the little arrow of her truck stranded in the middle of a vague white smear that represented the mountains. Traffic cams say it's gridlock past the summit, Ray went on. Wreck a few miles up. Best not to be part of that. Aaron glanced at the radio, then at the empty mirror on his side of the lot. Which truck are you in? She asked. I don't see anyone moving. Second from the end on the wall, he said readily. Blue. Kenworth. Old girl. But she pulls. She looked more closely. There was a blue Kenworth near the far end, sure enough. But even through the blowing snow, she could see the outline of its hood, the way the paint dulled. The logo on the door was a company name she hadn't seen in years, Harrison and Sons Freight, in a style that looked a decade out of date. There was snow crusted along the wheel wells. A lot of snow, more than should have accumulated since she'd pulled in. Thought you said you'd been here half an hour, Aaron said quietly. Ray's laugh crackled. Feels longer than that, he replied. You know how it is. Time crawls when you're stuck. Her dashboard clock still read 2:17. She stared at it for a long moment, watching the colon between the numbers blink. The minutes did not advance. The heater blew on. Her engine idled. Everything inside the cab sounded normal. Outside, nothing changed. Snow fell at the exact same angle. The same flurries seemed to cross her headlights on the same paths. The wind whistled around the mirror bracket with the same pitch, unbroken. Aaron's skin prickled. She checked the phone again. No service. The time in the corner of the black screen frozen also read 2:17. Hey, Ray, she said slowly. What's the date today? Static hissed over the speaker. Then, 23rd. Of what? She pressed. January, he answered, almost absently. 98. Aaron's heart thumped once. Hard. She looked at the Kenworth again, at the other trucks in the line. Now that she was really looking, details resolved in odd ways. One of the trailers had old-style DOT striping, the reflective tape pattern they'd stopped using years ago. Another had a phone number on the side with 7 digits, no area code. Snow had built up against some of their wheels in unfamiliar layers. Not fresh uniform drifts, but crusted, sculpted ridges, the kind that formed when storms came and went and came again. A soft electronic chime sounded from the overhead console. State.information, said a calm recorded voice through her speaker. Travelers are advised to remain in the North Point chain area until conditions improve. Do not attempt to proceed. Do not shut off engines. The message repeated. Aaron frowned. She hadn't tuned to any DOT channel. Her hands rested still in her lap. Did you hear that? She asked. Yeah, Ray said. His tone darkened. They started running that after what? Silence. The snow outside glowed softly in her headlights, an endless whirl. The world beyond the barrier no longer felt like a road and a drop. It felt like a blank. She unbuckled her seatbelt. Where you going? Ray asked, as if he could see her. Stretching my legs, she said. Wouldn't, he said quickly. Best to stay in the cab. A lot of folks got in trouble trying to walk around out there. She hesitated. Every bit of training, of common sense, said, stay put in a storm. Don't wander in whiteout conditions. Don't go exploring with limited visibility and cold. But the air in the cab had taken on a strange weight, like a room shut too long. She needed to see something that made sense. She pulled on her coat and stepped back out. The wind clawed at her hood immediately. Snow stung her cheeks and got into her eyes, turning the world into silver noise. She followed her own tracks from earlier. They were the only boot prints in the lot. She walked along the line of trucks. The first was a red Peterbilt. Its chrome bumper was dull under a thin layer of ice. A small stuffed animal dangled from the mirror on a filthy string, frozen stiff, its colors washed nearly away. She peered up at its side window. A shape sat in the driver's seat, unmoving. Head angled back against the rest. Aaron's breath caught. For a second, she thought she saw eyes pale, unfocused, turn toward her. Then the wind shifted, flinging snow against the glass, and whatever she'd seen blurred. She kept walking. The next truck's door bore a company name she recognized from old stories, Danvers Logistics. They'd gone under early in her career. The registration sticker on the windshield was the wrong color for this year, or the past 10. By the time she reached the blue Kenworth, her hands were shaking. Snow plastered the grill. The license plate hung crooked, half iced over. Someone had scraped a patch clear on the driver's side window, once, long ago. Frost had grown back in delicate ferns. Erin wiped at the glass with her glove. On the other side, a face stared back. It was a man in his 50s maybe, with a flattened ball cap and lines cut deep into the corners of his mouth. His skin had a grayness that didn't look entirely like the reflection of snow. His eyes, though, were sharp and very much aware. They were locked on her. His lips moved. The CB in her cab crackled at the same time. "You shouldn't be out here," Ray's voice said in her ear. On the other side of the glass, the driver's mouth formed the same words. "You're not stuck like we are." Cold sank deeper into her. "How long have you been here?" she whispered. The man's eyes shifted, as if looking past her, past the lot, toward the unseen road. "Long enough to watch the same night come back," he said. The radio echoed him perfectly. "Long enough to hear that message until I know it by heart. Stated information, do not attempt to proceed. Storm took the pass when we were lined up here," he went on. "Avalanche hit the summit. They knew it was possible. Posted signs. Ran warnings. But they left us out here to wait." A gust of wind rattled his mirror. "Road never opened again for us," he said. "We just keep sitting at mile 178. Chains on, engines burning fuel that doesn't run out. Every time the weather hits right, this place opens its doors, looking for more to park." Erin's breath steamed the window between them. "What happens if I stay?" she asked, though she already knew. "You won't feel it at first," Ray said. "You'll get tired. You'll think you're just dozing between updates. Time will get thin. Before long, the only road you remember is the one that never clears." He lifted a hand slowly, as if it weighed far more than it should, and pressed his palm to the glass from his side. It left no print. Frost did not melt under it. "Or," he said quietly, "you can go, while you still can, while your clock still moves." Erin looked back at her own truck. Through the snow, her running lights glowed a clean, modern red. Her logo was crisp. Her trailer's reflective tape caught, and threw back her headlights in neat, straight lines. It looked like it belonged to a different picture than the row of tired shapes beside it. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Above the howl of the wind, the recorded announcement started again, tinny and insistent. "Travelers are advised to remain." She turned and ran. Her boots slipped once on packed snow, sending a shock up her knee, but she kept her footing. She reached her cab, hauled herself up by the grab handle, and slammed the door against the storm. Inside, everything was as she'd left it. Warm, familiar. Her clock still read 2:17 m. As she gripped the wheel, the numbers flicked. Ardian Shubafen, Ardian Shudjolfen. Breath shuddered out of her lungs. On the CB, Ray's voice spoke one last time, softer now, as if from far away. "Don't look back when you hit the road," he said. "Some of them don't like when someone leaves." Erin's hands moved automatically. Brake off. Gear engaged. Gentle throttle. Her chains clinked as the truck rolled. The lot's single lamp flickered once, twice, as if in protest. The snow in front of her seemed to resist, clinging to her tires. Then it gave. The exit from the chain area led up and left, back toward the highway. As she climbed, the wind pressed against her side, trying to shove her back. The engine growled, working. For a second, the world narrowed to white and the faint edge of the concrete barrier. Then she broke through. The highway itself was covered, but visible two pale tracks through the snow where other plows and vehicles had passed. Far ahead, a pair of taillights bobbed, normal and red and solid, attached to a late-model tractor trailer like hers. In her mirror, the chain-up lot sat half-hidden behind a veil of falling snow. She did not slow, did not stare, but just before the grade curved away, taking the view with it, her eyes flicked back once, traitorously. For that heartbeat, the lot looked empty. No trucks, no lamp. Just an old, half-collapsed patch of asphalt, a broken signpost, and snow drifted high against a crumbling barrier. For a moment, she glimpsed the scar of an old landslide higher up the slope, dark against the white. Then it vanished around the bend. At the bottom of the pass, the road widened near a scale house. The building wore a newer face than many. Bright lights, digital signs. A DOT officer stood outside, stamping his feet against the cold. He waved her onto the scale, then stepped up to her window as she cranked it down. Chains. Good, he said, glancing at her tires. How was it up there? Could be worse, she said, still catching her breath. Chain area at 170. 8's busy. He frowned. We don't have a chain area at 178, he said. Not anymore. They closed that turnout after the avalanche back in the 90s. Too dangerous. Some trucks were stuck there for days. Erin stared at him. You're sure? She asked quietly. He nodded. Only one now is at 182, he said. Fresh pavement, good drainage. You must have used that one. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Yeah, she said. Must have. The officer tapped her door twice in a friendly way. Ride safe, he said. Storm's moving east. You'll be out of it soon enough. As she pulled away, the weight of the mountain behind her, Erin looked once at the small bulletin board outside the scale house. There, under the plexiglass, was a laminated newspaper clipping, yellowed at the edges. North Point Pass Tragedy, the headline read. Beneath it, a black and white photo showed a line of trucks half buried in snow at a chain-up lot. One of them was a blue Kenworth. You could just make out the company name on the side. Harrison and Sons Freight. The caption mentioned 3 drivers who never made it home. Among the names was Ray Harrison. Erin drove on. From then on, whenever a winter run pointed her toward North Point, she checked her clock more often. If the forecast said light flurries, she added her own margin of caution. And if a chain-up lot ever felt too still, too silent, she kept going to the next one, even if it meant wrestling chains on in the open dark. On certain nights, with snow curling around her headlights and the mountain wind shaping itself into strange harmonies, she could swear she heard a faint voice under the hiss of the CB. Tired, but steady. Keep it rolling, it would say. Don't stop where the road forgets you. And somewhere, at a mile marker that didn't officially have a turnout anymore, a row of old trucks waded through another replay of the same long night, watching the white Freightliner that didn't join them disappear safely over the ridge. As the rain fades and the road quiets, remember, not every story ends when the engine stops. Out there, beyond the glow of the dashboard, some shadows still move, waiting for the next traveler to drift their way. If you made it this far, you're braver than most. Don't forget to like this video, share your city and the time you're listening in the comments, and subscribe to The Sleep Haunt so you never miss another haunting mile of the night road. Sleep well, if you can.